So this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions on the internet, only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, not on cable platforms. This is the part A of the Khoodeelaar television broadcast under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo on Thursday, the 19th of October 2023. The visit, the visit by Joe Biden, the visit by Joe Biden of the state of Palestine, misnamed as the Zionist state of Israel. The visit has not included the Palestinian people. The visit has been a part of the propaganda of which Joe Biden is a part, not a leader of the propaganda, but a part of the propaganda tool, an instrument of the propaganda for the Zionist state. The visit has been reported in Thursday's London Dirty Digger controlled Times newspaper in one way, and the supposedly same visit reported by the daily lying Boris Johnson graph in a completely different opposite way, and so on. Joe Biden is not somebody that has a political record at all consistent with the objectives of promoting international peace, let alone sustained peace, be opposed to genocidist warfare. Biden has, of course, been vice president when Barack Obama, the mental slave, was incumbent in the White House for 2 terms, 8 years altogether. And at age 80 or thereabouts, Joe Biden is not especially fit for intellectually demanding, rigorous activities. Add to that the fact that he has got an immorality. His profile is one of immorality, lack of ethics, lack of consistency, lack of fairness. It is a product of the racist Democratic Party bureaucracy, which is one instrument of the Zionist operation in the USA. The fact that Rishi Sunak, now, how do you describe Rishi Sunak? He has flown to Tel Aviv and is doing the same thing as all the UK incumbents in the office of Prime Minister of the UK have done since Balfour spread the idea of a Zionist state in Palestine. Rishi Sunak is not someone who has got the record of ethics or morality or independence. He is a mental slave even beyond the conception. I mean, he can go generations. Even The generations back in the Punjab, where his family actually, his original ancestors come from the area called Amritsar, Gujranwala, where the India born racist criminal Dyer became a British Army commander and ordered the mixed kind of troops to shoot unarmed civilian protesters in 1919, in April 1919, I think. Despite that connection, chronological connection, Rishi Sunak is not somebody who can be trusted or relied upon even to understand, what Gujranwala and the Amritsar massacre by Dyer actually represents. So he's gone to Israel, to Tel Aviv, to pay homage and tributes to the massacring regime fronted by Netanyahu, the nasty one. No doubt, it is not stated in the headline, but it is quite possible that Suella Ibila Cruella Fernandez would be part of the party that has gone to Israel to wrongly reinforce the support for genocide of the Palestinians that the Zionist state has been involved in carrying out. And Sunak has also, before he flew to Tel Aviv or Israel, let's say, because I'm not checking the actual destination where he landed, but let's say Israel. Even before he flew out of the UK, he updated the incitement and hateful narrative against the supporters of the campaign to stop the Zionist state continuing the massacre and genocide of the Palestinians and the demand for the end of the Zionist state's occupation of all Palestinian regions and lands and places, and the displacement, end to the displacement of the Palestinian people from their homes, from their homeland, that has been taking place for nearly 80 years now. So Rishi Sunak, those in the British media who carried at any point in the last 6 months any demand, whether it's an extended one, an elaborate one, or a brief one, for any action as Prime Minister that Sunak should have taken against Ibilar Suela Cruella Fernandez. Those who have written that, or those who have spoken to that effect, have actually exhibited their stupidity. Absolute stupidity. Because Suela Ibilar Cruella is a direct agent of the Zionist state of Israel. And the United Kingdom cabinet or whatever is a directly controlled operation by the Zionist state when it comes to assessing in the context of the events of the last 12 days, or in fact of the last 80 years, from the conception of the Zionist state of Israel to its construction to the hourly expansion of the Israeli state and the corresponding displacement, destruction of the Palestinian people. There is no organ, there is no platform in the United Kingdom that can be cited as being even reliably a source that can be cited as one that is recording what is going on. In the former parts of the state of Palestine, under the Zionist state's occupation, forced occupation. No organ, no media, no member of parliament, no member of the House of Peers, no member of any party in opposition can be relied on to even recognize the basic truth of what has been going on in Palestine and what has been happening in the rest of the continent of Asia, where, for example, in Afghanistan, the earthquake has killed thousands of people with not a single story about those thousands of people who have died being given anything like the prominence or importance or space or significance or display in any of the printed media or indeed in any of the broadcast media, the BBC, the Sky News, etc., etc. The stinking thing called Rod Liddle, the stinking thing is called stinking thing because one of his former wives or girlfriends, I think of long standing, whether it was a former wife or a girlfriend, whatever the status, it was actually a person who physically lived with the stinking Rod Liddle for a number of years. She lived with him for long enough to form the reliable opinion that he stank. So, as far as she was concerned, he stank. But as far as Liddle's opinions are concerned, he stinks, horribly stinks of complete prejudice, hatred, evilness, criminality. And he has been at it by targeting the BBC, the idea of the BBC. The idea of the BBC, even pretending to be impartial and neutral and objective, and to refuse to describe the Hamas organization as a terrorist organization. This is something that the stinking Rod Liddle has actually brought into the focus. And he has been at it. Whoever would listen or whoever would give him a space, either the Scum or the Times, is being told by the stinking Rod Liddle that the BBC, by refusing to report Hamas as a terrorist organization, is committing a heinous crime. What he is meaning there is that the BBC is biased. And the fact that the BBC refuses to condemn the Hamas organization as a terrorist organization proves that the BBC is biased. What the criminal stinking Rod Little doesn't want to accept is that it is not bias if the BBC copies and repeats the lies that has been confected and is daily confected by the State of Israel. The Zionist State of Israel assumes that the BBC is part of the State of Israel. That is what the stinking Rod Little is actually saying. That is what the scum is saying. That if the BBC doesn't repeat word for word everything that the Zionist State of Israel confects and retails, then that is proof that the BBC is disloyal to the truth. This is such a completely monstrous proposition. But that's what the Fleet Street media is carrying. That what Rod Little is saying, what the BBC should be doing, is the truth. Nothing that Rod Little has said in the period since Andrew Gilligan was identified as the person who got David Kelly into lethal, deadly trouble. Nothing Rod Little has said is to accept the fact that he said at that time that Andrew Gilligan was a thoroughly investigative, careful, and intelligent and rigorous reporter, investigative reporter. He said that on the basis that when he, Rod Little, was the editor of the Radio 4 program, Today program, he found Andrew Gilligan to be conscientious, careful, and investigative journalist. Apart from that particular thing, which was absolutely accurate, nothing that Rod Little has said since the murder of David Kelly. He has not even talked about David Kelly's murder. Now, why not? If he was prepared to fend for Andrew Gilligan against accusations that he was irresponsible, etc., etc., how come that after the man was murdered, the weapons investigator, scientist David Kelly, was murdered and Rod Little has not said anything? Not that I have been able to find anything that Rod Little has said about David Kelly. What does this silence by Rod Little show about his bias? Of course, he's biased, but he's deadly biased against the innocent and the innocents. The innocent David Kelly was murdered because he told the truth. He told the lying beliar that the Iraqi regime, fronted at the time by Saddam Hussein, did not have weapons of mass destruction. David Kelly and his team could not find any weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that they investigated. Now, that was absolutely kind of definitive moment. If David Kelly's report and finding were given due prominence and publicity and place in the British media coverage, then Tony Blair's mad, lunatic, evil claim against Iraq launching an attack within 48 hours or 24 hours would have collapsed. And that would have really seriously have damaged any credibility that the mass murderer, criminal, Tony Blair had been perpetrating and propagating. That is the extent. That is the extent of the silence by Rod Liddell about David Kelly, about Iraq, about weapons of mass destruction. But he is quite happy to dance in the parade of the evil genocidist murderers of Palestinian innocent people. How do you even begin to condemn this? How do you even begin to measure this? Let's check on something that I have not checked in the last almost a year, if not longer. And I shall mention what I mean by the check. So there is the latest item. This is on the website of the Sunday Post, which is an outlet published from Scotland. It says George Galloway will not stand in Rutherglen by election despite £12,000 crowdfunder. Now that is dated the 6th of August. And what I'm doing there is connecting George Git Galloway to the events of the last 12 days. This liar, Git Galloway, has been silent about Tony Blair and is been silent, more deadly silent, as far as the media that I am checking is concerned, about the massacre of the people in Palestine by the Zionist state in the last 12 days. It says on the piece, online piece in the Sunday Post, George Galloway will not stand in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by election despite crowdfunding more than 12,000 for a campaign. And the Sunday Post morons call this liar a firebrand. He's no fucking firebrand. He's a fucking opportunist liar who has been raising funds under various corruptly kind of attached to so-called campaigns. The firebrand former MP told the Sunday Post he is currently working abroad and has no intention of fighting for the seat. Galloway raised £12,289. Sorry. Galloway raised £12,239 from 442 supporters. Sorry, I'll read that again because I'm mislooking at it and misreading it. Galloway raised £12,239 from 422 supporters over 45 days. In late 2020, saying any unspent cash would help contest the upcoming Holyrood elections. In a video appealing for donations, at the time, Galloway assured backers a by-election is inevitable following the COVID rule-breaking former SNP MP Margaret Ferrier. At the time, he vowed, this train, which has left the station, is going all the way to victory. This fucking cunt keeps doing this. He keeps saying that he's going to win. I mean, the most embarrassing series of such utterances were made in Tower Hamlets before the 2010 general election, in which he stood for Poplar and Limehouse against, as he said, fellow Scot, Jim Fitzpatrick. Now, Jim Fitzpatrick is similarly corrupt, lying, racist, dishonest shitbag. And when he spewed his challenge against Fitzpatrick, Git Galloway called the confrontation or challenge Battle of the Scots. Now look at this. It was a constituency in Tower Hamlets in the widely deprived borough of Tower Hamlets. And the shitbag showed his contempt for the potential electors for him in Poplar and Limehouse by calling it the Battle of the Scots. And he's a liar as well about the various people that have spoken about the need for Scotland to become independent of England. And he has spread all kinds of lies, insinuations against the motivations of those who wanted to hold a second referendum on the issue of this Scotland politically. Now, this item that I'm looking at on the Sunday Post, which clearly is produced by morons, because they call him firebrand. What the fuck? He's not a firebrand, never has been, never ever has been a firebrand, but a liar. This is dated the 6th of August, 2023. Now, this is 23, 6th of August. September, October is more than 2 months ago. And was it? It's even more than 2 months before the particular events in Israel. When did the Hamas action take place? It's one day, 2 months and a day before the Hamas action on the 7th of October. So this Sunday Post item is dated 2 months and a day before the Hamas action. And how is it that they haven't run a follow up, anything to do with the Galloway kind of solidarity with the Palestinian people? Let's check if there is anything that he has said about this organization called Hamas in the recent past. That is, of course, he has said in the previous periods, but let's see whether he has said anything in the aftermath of the 7th of October action. So there is no, I cannot find anyway. If there is any that I find later, I shall, of course, update on this comment. But the position I have, based on the search on the online items about the matter, I cannot find any reference to George Galloway. How astonishing! The only reference to a George I find is George Clooney. And the headline that I have seen, I have not read the copy inside underneath the headline, but the headline says that he, George Clooney, is married to a Lebanese, Amal Alamuddin. He doesn't call her Alamuddin, but I'm calling her Amal Alamuddin because that's the original name. So let's check again on the availability of any reference to George Galloway. I'm just going to type this name. Fucking disgrace. So there is one mention I found of Galloway in an online mail on Daily Mail online piece, which I'm going to quote. Pro Palestine former Labour and Respect Party MP George Galloway shared a message on Twitter that read within quotes, "Never ever forget the journalists and media personalities that helped spread the claims of Palestinians cutting babies' heads off with no evidence. Nobody spreads more misinformation than Zionists and the Western media allies." That is all the reference to George Galloway in that piece that I have accessed on the Daily Mail online. Now, why is it that that's the only piece? Where is the details about Git Galloway, whose career, whose entire political career, apart from addressing the essential kind of election time issues of constituents in a given constituency, Git Galloway has made his entire political career by claiming to be a very genuine, serious supporter of the Palestinians. Now, George Galloway has not made any similar claims about anything else. Even the program, the BBC Newsnight, broadcast about George Galloway receiving money from Benazir Bhutto, the former Pakistan Prime Minister, and a People's Party. Even that was a kind of one off in terms of the longevity in the overall context and the evidence of Git Galloway's political, within quotation, political career when it is compared with the number of times he has referred to himself as the voice of the Palestinian support among white Westerners, especially white Britons or white people in the United Kingdom, let's say. And this event of the 7th of October by Hamas has been widely reported as being from the standpoint of the Zionist state of Israel and its stooges and backers, the worst event against the state of Israel in 50 years. So it is that important. So if Git Galloway was to be treated as a genuine supporter of the people of Palestine, then he would have logically and rationally made an extensive comment or even a series of extensive comments and broadcasts and written comments, if you like, about the 7th of October events. And if he had made that, or if he had made those comments, the search would have produced the results, but there is nothing except the bit that I read from the Mail Online about the misinformation. Let's try another way of checking if he has got anything. Now, there is a piece that is very strange indeed. It is displayed among the first five items at the top about Gallaudet and the searching. And this one is says 2 years old, and it's on the Daily Mail online website. Gallaudet demands apology from Blair. Now, for a start, the first paragraph is wrong. Gallaudet was last a Labour MP was 20 years ago. So he's not a Labour MP. He's never been a Labour MP for the last six elections or whatever, five elections. 2005, 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019. So let's say four elections. He has not been a Labour MP, has not been a Labour candidate. And yet they're saying uh, that he's a rebel Labour MP. They could have done that if they were actually thinking of the accuracies, but they don't care. Rebel Labour MP George Gallaudet is suspended from the party over an outspoken TV interview in which he denounced the war in Iraq, stands by his comments. He demanded an apology from Prime Minister Tony Blair and the Labour Party over his suspension. So it's not a recent item that the Daily Mail is running. It's an item going back 20 years. So let's read on. The left wing MP for Glasgow Kelvin, so it's a long time ago for fuck's sake, was suspended after an interview with Abu Dhabi television on March 28th. At the time when British and American troops were fighting in Iraq. In the interview, Gallaudet said of Bush and Blair, they attacked Iraq like wolves. They attacked civilians. He had asked British soldiers to refuse to obey illegal orders. His case comes before the Labour Party's National Constitutional Committee. Now, that was a long time ago when he will face five accusations. BBC television's The Politics show said today. The program said the charges were that he incited Arabs to fight British troops, that he incited British troops to defy orders, that he incited Plymouth voters to reject Labour MPs, that he threatened to stand against Labour, and that he backed an anti war candidate in Preston. All the accusations were said to have been laid under a Labour rule, which forbids behaviour likely to be detrimental to the party. But Gallaudet told the program he stood by everything he had said about Tony Blair. Every comment that I have made before, during, and since the war, I stand by, he said. I'm apologizing for nothing, but I'm prepared to accept an apology from him. I'm prepared to accept an apology from the Labour Party for having suspended me from the party I have been in for 36 years. For more than 6 months on absolutely bogus, trumped up charges. So, this is not a current story, which makes it even more credible for me to say that George is a git, liar, How come that he has not made the very well overdue, detailed statement in support of the people of Palestine? Because when the BBC Newsnight, which I keep referring to for a very good reason, which I shall reiterate again in the next few minutes, when the BBC Newsnight program actually had the real sense and broadcast this item about George Galloway, detailing his receiving money from Benazir Bhutto, etc., etc., George Galloway did not sue the BBC Newsnight program or the BBC or any reporter, anyone. And there lies the real burden of the evidence against George Galloway that he's a crook. I'm saying this on the record, and I'm saying this in the knowledge that he or his cabal will be watching this at some stage. I'm asking him to sue me for calling him a crook. Now I know that this liar thinks that he cannot sue me, and that exposes him even further. He said that he would not sue me because, as he said, not me saying it, I didn't have the money. How the fuck this shitbag is concerned about the money, not the truth? Fuck off, you lying creep. You didn't know whether I had money or not because you didn't have the actual moral courage to sue me, you shit. I called you a liar. I called you a crook. Why didn't you sue me, you shit? George Galloway is a liar. And when the BBC Newsnight program broadcast that item, that report about him, it was many years before the Telegraph ran that story about him, and he sued immediately. And the Telegraph paid money, which the crook then used to launch himself, of all places, as a candidate in Tower Hamlets. And he used it for 5 years to keep being able to use the two letters MP after his name. And then he fucked off. He fucked off in search for another gullible electoral constituency. And he found it in West Yorkshire, Bradford West, where the Muslims took him in good faith and voted for him. But he misread it completely. He thought that he was a Muslim, not because he was a Muslim, because he never has answered the question in the affirmative that he is a Muslim. Despite the fact that while he was using the two letters MP by exploiting the people, misrepresenting the people of Bradford West, this mysterious, stupid Jemima Khan surfaced as, on behalf of the New Statesman, fuck them. And that Galloway, who is on the record as having expressed clearly sexually charged kind of weaknesses for women like Jemima Khan, she claimed, admitted to her that he had become a Muslim. But he's never admitted to anyone else on the face of the earth in public anywhere. So as soon as the people of Bradford West realized that he was a fraud. They looked for a possible credible candidate they would elect or support in the next proper general election, which is what happened. And he knew that he had been exposed as a fraudster, political opportunist and fraudster. And people of Bradford West were not going to give him any votes. So he started a campaign, lying campaign against the Muslim woman and the Muslim community. Even if he became a Muslim, which I cannot kind of comment on in terms of either whether he is or is not a Muslim, he would have done that as part of the opportunistic, corrupt ingratiation of himself to the Muslims of any particular location or constituency. If he had become a Muslim, he would never attack the Muslims because he would only attack the wrongdoing parts of the Muslim population. He would not attack the Muslims generally. In Tower Hamlets, when he wrongly and stupidly said that his alleged contest or challenge against Jim Fitzpatrick represented the Battle of Scots. I mean, as I have said earlier in this program, it was not anything to do with the Battle of Scots. It was very much to do with two individuals, both of them discredited and discreditable opportunists who came from Scotland. I don't want to blame the Scottish race or the Scottish background at all. These are the two individuals that are at fault. And as soon as he was definitively kind of defeated by Jim Fitzpatrick, he had no support in Tower Hamlets. And I'll give the example. Because as I was walking from north to south along Brick Lane, in the evening after the results were known of the election on the 2010 general election, I was approached. I didn't approach Azman Hussain, but Azman Hussain approached me and offered his opinion. He volunteered his opinion about George Galloway. I didn't seek it. I would never ask Azman Hussain about George Galloway because of what I'm about to say had happened. Azman Hussain was a liar and he exploited George Galloway for his own personal benefit to show himself as a friend of an MP. In pursuing which narrative and purpose, Azman Hussain allowed the entire cabal of George Galloway for the whole period of 5 years to have free meals in Azman Hussain's restaurant in Brick Lane. But on the night after the result of the 2010 general election became known, Azman Hussain approached me and volunteered a series of expletives that he was applying against George Galloway, including saying he's a crook, he's a liar and a shitbag, and all the rest of it, whatever words that Azman Hussain could muster. And this was a man who fed the entire cabal of George Galloway's for 5 years. And he was most anxious that I should know what he actually thought about George Galloway. So if it was Ajmal Hussain that was so determined to confirm to me, uninvited, that is to say, I didn't ask for it, and I would not need Ajmal Hussain to tell me anything about George Git Galloway because I knew the necessary facts about him, then there would be nobody. There would be nobody else in all of Tar Hamlets, especially not in the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency, who would have anything to say about George Git Galloway that would be positive. Now, when Git Galloway became convinced that he had no political future by exploiting the people of Tar Hamlets, he reverted to the tiny gang of crooks that were operating this agenda, this corrupt agenda for the foisting of the elected post of mayor, elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. So when on the evidence of the accountants, one of the accountant firms reported on Tower Hamlets Council under the frontage of so-called elected mayor Nuthuraman, Eric the Pickles stood up in the House of Commons on the 4th of November 2014 and he delivered a spiel. Now, Eric Pickles is a particularly nasty piece of racist and a very ignorant idiot. But when the evidence of the misconduct and corruption in terms of finance that was unearthed by the accountant firm, the accountant firm was not a particularly efficient one, and the report that they had actually submitted to the Pickles was not a very rigorous one either. But compared to the void that would have existed without such a report, that report, despite the incompleteness, etc., constituted some reference of substance. So I saw that as that always. Now, having worked briefly as an accountant, I know how the business of accountant firms, operates. It's a corrupt profession altogether. So whoever the accountant's firm was, obviously was doing its own corruption itself while looking at the corruption in and by the Tar Hamlets Council under the incumbency of Luthuraman. So whatever Eric the Pickle said in the House of Commons on the 4th of November 2014 was not in praise of Luthuraman. And one of the things that he announced was the appointment of commissioners or the decision to send commissioners, as they said, to Tar Hamlets. Now, I have said extensively elsewhere that the commissioners that Eric the Pickle sent to Tar Hamlets were a pair of morons. And they were extended in number 4 or 5, I think. But the initial ones were the former fire brigades union person, Knight and another one from Hackney. So these two they turned out to be crooks themselves, in my assessment anyway. But that took place over the period of 2015, 2016, maybe 2017, which was quite a long time. But on the immediate kind of response to Eric Pickle's announcement that he was sending what they call, in an exaggerated kind of misuse of the language, commissioners. The only thing that they commission, or only thing that could be related to the commissioning of something, was the committing of the crimes of aggravating the corruption of Travelers Council by these two fucking commissioners. But that's not how Lutfur Rahman's cabal wanted to see the announcement by Eric the Pickles. They organized an event of protest, allegedly, very quickly, and it was held, I think, and I'll check the date again, either on the 12th of November 2014 or 13. Let's check the date when the commissioners were appointed and when the so-called protest meeting took place in the Water Lily Center. So this is the BBC's account, and the heading is Tower Hamlets Mayor defended by George Galloway MP. So that's dated the 12th of November 2014. Now, George Galloway was, of course, not an MP in Tower Hamlets, but he came from Bradford West. And in the picture that the BBC item online has with that story, the faces of Gate Galloway to Lutfur Rahman's left and Ken Livingston Livingstone on Lutfur Rahman's right are seen as the prominent faces there in that picture. And the story reads as follows. The under fire mayor of Tower Hamlets has been defended by Respect MP George Galloway at a rally in East London. Last week, the government announced it would send in commissioners to Tower Hamlets Council to oversee how it handed out grants and sold property. It was in response to a critical report that found there was a culture of cronyism at the council. Mr. Galloway said there was a witch hunt against Mayor Lutfur Rahman and that he was backed by residents. Speaking to a crowd of about 1,000 people in Mile End, Mr. Galloway said, just what exactly did Mayor Lutfur Rahman do wrong? Now, these people that they say numbered 1,000 were not ordinary electors in Tower Hamlets at all. They were mobilized by a cabal based at the East London Mosque, East London Muslim Center, and they most certainly did not represent broad cross section of electors in Tower Hamlets. Full stop. And Galloway's quote in the BBC piece continues, quote, he, that is Luthraman, presides over some of the best schools in the whole of the United Kingdom. Fuck off, you fucking liar. That's a lie. In the poorest borough, he has a house building program in a country where there is scarcely a house affordable for the people be built, you fucking lying crook. Lever's former mayor, Ken Livingstone, was also at the rally. Last week, Community Secretary Eric Pickles called the mayor a medieval monarch, adding, there is a clear picture that there has been a fundamental breakdown of governance in this mayoral administration. The council, that is Tower Hamlets, said the report showed no evidence of criminality or fraud, and issues identified by it had already been flagged up internally and were being rectified accordingly. Now that's the piece which doesn't actually refer to Ken Lyons to Livingstone, who made the call to demonstrate against the commissioners outside the commissioners' houses. So that piece has disappeared mysteriously. What actually happened at the time was that at the same rally, so called, Ken Lyons to Livingstone called on the so called supporters of Lutheraman to go and demonstrate outside the homes of the two commissioners or any number of commissioners that Eric Pickles had actually appointed. Now, this was condemned, widely condemned at the time correctly. And I'll come to that in a minute after I check this one by Galloway, on Galloway by Ted Jory. Now, Ted Jory put that piece on his Twitter account ahead of the actual rally. So he said, Galloway and Khan can rally for Luthor. And just where was the mayor on Remembrance Sunday? During my 3 years at the East London Advertiser, I spent a fair amount of time with George Galloway's aides in the Respect Party. Well, Ted Jury can say that because he spent most of that time in pubs drinking with the so called aides. I'm fairly confident in saying that had the PwC report been written about the Labour administration in Tower Hamlets back then when he was having drinks with Galloway's aides, they would have milked it for all it's worth, which is absolutely correct. There were as scathing, they were, that is George Galloway's cabal, were as scathing about the then council leader in 2008, Lutfur Rahman, as they were about his predecessors, Denise Jones and Michael Keith. In particular, they disliked what they believed to be the whiff of cronyism in both the awarding of grants and also the appointments of useful mates to political positions. In fact, Respect's decision to organize successful petition that heralded the directly elected mayoral system in 2009 to 2010 was an attempt to end such a culture. They are good. So it will be interesting to see if Galloway or Glenn Robbins, the former chair of Tarhamlet's Respect, or John Rees, a founding father of the party, refer to any of these when they address the following rally, the Water Lily Center in Mile End tomorrow night. So Ted Jury's piece appeared on the 11th of November, and the rally Defend Democracy in Tower Hamlets was dated 12th, the day after. And Jury is quoting Lutfur Rahman as follows. Lutfur Rahman has sent this email to his Tower Hamlets first supporters. You will probably have heard by now that Secretary of State Eric Pickles has ordered officials in to undermine local democracy in Tower Hamlets, and it's local residents that are paying for it. You also may have heard that despite Pickles' decision to send in the attack dogs, the report he ordered found no fraud or corruption in Tower Hamlets. He seized on any flimsy excuse he can find to shut down the 37,395 voices that voted for Mayor Lutfur Rahman, and for a council that stands up to the cuts and invests in education, affordable homes, and our future. This is Pickles versus the people, and it's up to all of us to stand up to him. Here is some simple things they can do. Sign the petition to stop the witch hunt of Lutfur. Join me at a rally with Ken Livingstone and other national leaders at the Water Lily. Now, national leaders, for fuck's sake, there was no national leader there. Ken Livingstone Livingstone was not a national leader, nor was the crook George Git Galloway, and there was nobody else. 69 Mile End Road on Wednesday, the 12th of November at 6 p.m. to discuss how we can stand up for democracy. Tweet and Facebook your opinions about all this under the hashtags Tower Hamlets and Respect Votes. Get in touch with any ideas you have. Thank you so much for your help. We haven't got big banks or corporate newspapers on our side, so every little thing you do really does count. In solidarity, Tower Hamlets first. The petition they referred to is here, that is Ted Jury in his blog, and at the time of writing has 675 votes.
Note its name, respect our democracy and treat councils equally. And note the Twitter hashtag supporters are being asked to use respect our votes. The word respect is propping up a lot. So, of course, Galloway won't lash out at Lutfer for his policy and process failures. They are merely flimsy excuses. Lutfer is now a convenient pickles versus the people general election tool. Convenient for Lutfer too. Of course, posing the bigger question acts as a smokescreen for the criticisms. But that's politics. This is Ted Jury saying. Anyway, Luther is now a, but that's politics. There is even some talk among Luther supporters that Luther may all call a mayoral by election to re-establish his authority. I'm not convinced he would press that nuclear button, and in any case, I'm not sure when he would press it. The election court hearing is due to start in mid late January, and it could last until March. Even then, the verdict may be reserved for some weeks. This is still Ted Jury in his blog. If he emerges from that victorious, I'm not sure why he would want to need to hold a by election, although he could emerge victorious but tainted and damaged. Who knows what his priorities are? That's still Ted Jury. Certainly, he didn't prioritize Remembrance Sunday again this year. He was again a no show at the wreath laying ceremony at Tower Hill on Sunday when there were huge crowds in the area observing the ceramic poppy display in the Tower of London moat across the road. Luther's reserved seat next to the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of London, Commander John Ludgate, remained empty. I asked the council press office for an explanation, and this was their reply. The mayor was regrettably unable to attend the Merchant Navy Memorial Service on Sunday due to long standing commitments to attend an Young People's Education Award ceremony outside London. In his absence, the mayor asked Mickey Ambrose, former footballer and Duke of Edinburgh Awards ambassador, to represent him and lay a wreath on his behalf. Mr. Ambrose said, I was honored to be a part of such a moving service and pay my respects to the courageous men and women who have served our country. The mayor attended a remembrance service on Friday at City Hall with other mayors and council leaders and is looking forward to the admissible Armistice Day event on Tuesday at the town hall. The mayor will also host a reception for war veterans after the event. That ends as Ted Jury is back. Mickey Ambrose stood and lost as a Tower Hamlets first candidate in Bow East in May, quite why Luther asked him to deputize and not any of his elected councillors is a mystery. I also asked the council what his this long-standing award ceremony commitment was when it actually took place and where it was held. They have declined to reply. Anybody know? So that's the end of that piece by Ted Jury in his blog. Now, clearly, Ted Jury is as artificial and fake as George Galloway's cabal. Now, one of the things that having an elected mayor in Tower Hamlets would bring, I warned, would be to give excuse to racists to misuse the Bangladeshis and abuse the Bangladeshis for the corruption and unfitness for purpose that the incumbent that would be in post would commit. And that is evident in this comment by one of the persons who has commented on Ted Jury's piece. It says, kick out the mayor, that is Luthuraman, and all his lackeys, and educate the Bangladeshis about Remembrance Sunday. Now, the spelling of the Bangladeshis there is wrong. It says is spelled Bangladeshies. That's wrong. Bangladeshis is spelled without the E at the end. In any case, Ted Jury should have not published this without a comment, an apology of his own. But because he's a racist moron, and especially a racist moron who is part of the operation of anti-Muslim narrative, Ted Jury didn't give a fuck. Very disappointed with the mayor's deliberate absence. This continues this racist commenter. I could understand if he was seriously ill or had a death in the family. But how on earth could the mayor and his public parasites, funded by the borough's council taxpayers, allow the mayor to vanish without trace from London on Remembrance Sunday? The same commenter continues. Raman knew well in advance, many weeks ago, that Remembrance Sunday was coming. Everyone was wearing a poppy just to remind him and his mob. Just how long has the mayor lived in the UK? Now, that is a racist question as well. The same commenter continues, Rahman has hang your head and apologize to the public for letting them down on this important national non-political day. Resign and let a better person do your job. Labour Party too. Labour created Rahman. This is the comment by this was a comment by somebody who posted as Curious Cat. So another one, the Irish girl, it says, he knows no shame, apologizing. He does not know how to. Do you know who I am still? Who I am? I am Mayor Rahman. Labour did this to us. They too should say sorry. He's an utter disgrace to this borough and its proud heritage. His contempt to our fallen is beyond words. I can put on here. That is Granville Mills saying, you Judge Rahman says the report the government ordered found no fraud or corruption in Tower Hamlets. The PwC report states 1.11. We note in addition that as at the date of this report, there are a number of criminal investigations ongoing into allegations of fraud. 2.57. We note that evidence of possible fraudulent payments had been identified and reported by the authority to the police in connection with 9 third sector organizations not included in our sample that received monies under the YCS program. By agreement with the police, we have not examined these matters in detail. So Lutfur Rahman is an absolute liar. But then this is not news. This is only a part of the account that is read from the TED jury blog for the obvious reason that it contains the relevant bits that I have needed to mention. Now we shall end this particular edition of this program after 1 hour 34 minutes at 0317 hours GMT on Thursday, the 19th of October 2023, and we shall continue updating on the relevant overdue points.